Joachim is a West Point graduate, former Army officer, and author of Don't Let the Bastards Get You Down. Now, after the military, Joachim earned a master's degree in clinical psychology and worked as a licensed therapist. He is an independent journalist focusing on geopolitics and US empire, and an author who's exposed today's global pedophilia scourge in a series of books entitled Pedophilia, and Empire, Satan, Sodomy and the Deep State, which are current Amazon bestsellers. Now, we're going to talk to Joachim today about the prevalence of pedophilia in the higher echelons of power, and whether the tide might be turning against those who have avoided the law in favour of victims. First of all, Joachim, you don't have to send an ambo for me, although isn't it incredible? Ever get that that thing in your throat, and you realise it's a bunch of frogs in the throat? It's terrible, isn't it?
Wrong time for it, yeah.
And right at the start, though, can you believe it? It says bang. Anyway, look, pedophilia and by the way, nice to see you. Thank you very much. Pedophilia and child abuse are really sore topics in the US and the UK, but they're sort of embedded into the elitism, aren't they?
Sure is. Pretty much in all main Western countries, especially Britain, 2 out of the 5 pedophilia and empire books were centered on Britain alone. That's 40% of all my research and work output on this topic is this little island nation called Great Britain. But it ain't so great when it comes to dirty men doing things to children. Uh, and yeah, I cover ground with the United States scandals, and right now with the Epstein thing, it's the big topic because we're finding out that a lot of these people that have been in positions of power, and some still are pedophiles and likely involved in Satanism. It's a big topic right now. And through Epstein exposure, we're still waiting on all the details on all those people that he serviced by bringing all the children to all these very wealthy, powerful people. Nobody beyond him and his partner in crime, Delane, have been prosecuted and punished. All the powerful people that were ever involved with Epstein, or for that matter, you can go back to the Elm Guest House scandal in Britain during the 70s and 80s. The uh, Pretty much the Westminster government has been so steeped in pedophilia, and so yeah, I devoted 2 out of the 5 books to that.
Tell me this: why is it that Epstein has highlighted the pedophilia, which is embedded in the echelons of society, especially the elite? Um, it's not brand new. It's been going on since Adam was a boy. But why now? Why? What has sort of? I don't know if turning the tide is the correct term for it, but it has created the awareness. Why now?
Because the powerful pedophiles have gotten away with it. And the scandals have come and gone, since the 70s, really, with children used as the bait and the blackmail currency. It's been going on heavily since the 1970s all the way to now. But of these powerful people that have been involved in this, nobody goes to jail. Nobody at the government level of the parliament or Congress level has gone to jail for a pedophile crime. Nobody. You might see somebody in the state and local levels that has happened, but at that higher level, across countries, Britain, America, none have gone to jail. So that's why the Epstein files are so important. because the people have not forgotten that there is a whole echelon of power and really, I mean, to do those things to children, you got to be totally sick in the head. Yet, these are our leaders, and they've all been unprosecuted. So that's why it's not going away, and it's bigger than ever, even with this idiot
Mm.
Epstein, supposedly dead, since 2019.
Look, it's interesting too, the super injunctions in the UK. Why would the court allow it?
You know, they're always the courts, the law enforcement, and the courts together have been controlled by the string pullers, the people above them, the people that are in the governments, at the top levels. They are the ones that always squelch these scandals. Come out and you hear something about it for a few weeks, and then they come in and they do all these kind of things like ban it from the press where you can't even talk about it, and much less name any names. And that's been the really the pattern all throughout all these different scandals. It's always gone that route where it's then covered up and suppressed. And, that's why it was left to someone like me who, I worked with basically victims of pedophilia and abused children in the system in America. In fact, in the largest child protection county in America, the Los Angeles County, I worked with them as a licensed therapist for several decades. So, it really hits me hard to know that this has gone on forever and never been properly prosecuted because the system is set up to only make life misery for any brave survivor of sexual abuse to want to report it and get justice within the injustice system. It's always an uphill struggle. They're re victimized constantly. I mean, the Epstein victims, they haven't had justice because none of their abusers have ever been brought to court. So yeah, that's the big problem that we're facing. And the good thing here is with all the publicity going around now with the Epstein files, uh, finally, maybe we are turning the tide, so to speak, where behind the public demanding it, and that's what's really important here. The public must demand justice for all the thousands, millions of child victims, and not just the victims that these powerful sick people do, but all victims. It's very common, some teacher or coach or like on the local level like that, but then it's on the big level of the powerful people too. And pretty much the powerful people, they can do that to the children and get away with it because they always have. We got to stop that.
I mean, pedophilia. I mean, my dad prosecuted went after the Catholic Church and government in Australia and police force, the whole lot. And it's amazing how the higher they become. In fact, the one he went after and he had a book out. He was Australia's leading paedophile. He was number one bad boy, and they finally got him, but the church moved him around and stuff. And I would imagine that any institution that has history of whatever behind it, such as the UK. Tell us about the UK Labor parliamentarian that a few people dare talk about. I mean, my mind is just racing away at the moment.
Peter Mandelson, um, you know, they call him the Prince of Darkness because
Mm.
he had the reputation for, as an MP, starting as an MP. he would be in London and he would go to the subway stations, and there's the rent boys, and it's a very notorious history in London for the rent boys. That's a kind of a derogatory term because they are the victims, but it's a derogatory term that is even like a crime to even say that kind of thing. But yeah, victims that are boys, they can be 12, they can be 15, they can be 17, like that age, um, down to 9, I guess, and they have been selected by groups of very powerful men, among them Peter Mandelson. He was actually caught in a Operation Or. That was a police operation uh, for investigating child pornography on the internet of people, on the computers of people, and they found that through Operation Or, his name came up, and wouldn't you know it, he was at that time a minister for Tony Blair, another criminal who went by the name of Miranda and cross dressed. He's another sicko, and I don't doubt, probably a pedophile. He certainly runs with them and protects them. And I wrote a whole chapter on him and how he's protected the pedophiles. And one of the pedophiles that he rewarded with minister positions, multiple minister, 35 different minister positions in the time of Mendelssohn's career. He's probably been a minister more times than any other British parliamentarian government quote servant. That's how long he's been around. And then he does these. He's been affiliated with the National Society for the Protection of Children, NSPCC, in Britain. They link these pedophiles with these organizations to protect pedophiles, but they are the gatekeepers. That's the bottom line. They always select gatekeepers to be in charge of, taking care of the abuse problem. Well, if you get the gatekeepers, it's not going to happen, and it hasn't. That's why Britain is so notorious for its pedophilia scandals. But it's as hard as the media tries to shut up, because they're, along with the court system and the law enforcement system, they protect those in power. Well, the sea change is now the people are now aware, finally, through the Epstein files, of the immensity of this problem worldwide. They're finally becoming aware. When I first started writing these books back in 2017, it hardly could come up. And then if it did, people would not want to talk about it because it's too brain shocking for most people to even consider what these powerful people do to innocent children.
Yeah, and one of the most powerful, being, well, recently anyway, is former Prince Andrew. Terrible, terrible, absolutely needs to rot in hell. Tell us about Carl Beech.
Carl Beech, right after Jimmy Savile, who in history was the biggest pedophile in British history, uh, hundreds of victims, and he was with the BBC. He was a big disc jockey and very famous celebrity. He was the best friend of King Charles III. You know, we had his brother, Andrew, the best friend of Jeffrey Epstein. There's no accident here that these royal figures at the top of England line up with the history's worst pedophiles in America and Britain. So, anyway, right after the death of Jimmy Savile, who lived his whole life without spending one day in jail, but after he died, it all started coming out. A lot of his victims started reporting the crimes of Jimmy Savile. And then there were these whole police operations, Operation Fernbridge, Operation Midland. And what came out of Operation Midland is zero arrests. But people like Carl Beech went to the police and started reporting his experience as a child from the age of 7 to about 16. We're talking 9 years that he's been in, shuffled around, trafficked around, um, London and mansions, and they, do the parties and do this, do the dirty. And he was a victim, one of the early ones that started reporting it. I think that was back in around 2015, 20 that he began reporting 2013, 2014. That was the mass exodus of once Savile was gone, and the police were like, because of the whole onslaught of the information about Savile, they were under a lot of pressure by the British people for answers, and they did this whole public inquiry. It lasted 6 years, and it also was just an act to placate the masses that are demanding justice, and it never happened. So anyway, all these police operations, uh, he emerged from Operation Midland, the police operation, and the police commissioner actually believed him because, yeah, there's a whole bunch of them coming out of the woodwork reporting the same things, at these parties. And not only would they do these pedophilic acts with these victims, they were actually murdering people, children, at those parties as well. Blood sacrifice, it kind of goes with the turf of these sickos at the top. And so he reported this along with hundreds of others at the time. They used his information, and then they actually went public with him in 2015. He started, having that name of Carl Beech. He went by Nick in the beginning, as anonymous. Anyway, the commissioner of the London Metro believed him, and the whole thing began with the Operation Midland to try and investigate the Parliament members and all the rest that were involved in the pedophilia around London and Westminster, and so that unveiled. And here's the thing, and I wrote this in a recent article, that at the same time that was going around, Cliff Richard, this very famous singer of England, uh, he was also a rent boy. At one time, he was, as a child, abused, and he became an abuser. Now, he actually was involved in the guest. He went by the guest name of Kitty. And there's all this evidence that, yes, Cliff Richard, the singer, very famous guy, has more hits over more decades than any other human, well, certainly in Britain. I think 6 decades straight, he had a number one hit, Cliff Richard. Anyway, he's got a legacy of pedophilia that he went to court in 2018. He went to court, and he got the court and that's why I linked these two things together. Carl Beech was a victim, and then they turned basically him into a victim again by saying, "Oh, he made it all up," and then he goes to jail. They even claimed that he was a pedophile and had child porn on his computer. So they made him the victim, and then with Cliff Richard, and that was in 2019 when he ended up in jail, and he's been in jail until just, 2 weeks ago, a week ago, or whatever. Anyway, at the same time that was going on, Cliff Richard basically had a reputation as a pedophile, and he needed to stop it. So they did a operation, a police operation. They raided his home at the same time that they invited the BBC with cameras there, and it was all set up because that was illegal for a police operation to actually be in communicado with the media, and then show it live on TV. He was in Barbados or one of his islands where he lives, and saw it on TV, his own home being raided at the time in live real time. Anyway, a big thing went down with him. He was under investigation for 2 years, and then the basically the prosecution service of England decided, okay, we don't have the evidence when there was loads of evidence, but they say, okay, the investigation's closed, and then he countersued and made £5 million worth back. In his suit that ended in 2018, and that basically shut the door to anybody that has a name that might be famous, well known, that you can't go after them. So it sealed the door shut for any more prosecutions of very high profile pedophiles, and at the same time, they shut the door for the victims to get justice with the Carl Beech case. So, and this is 2018 to 2019. So it's odd that Mandelson's now finally under a lot of heat and maybe investigated by police. I hope to God he is. He probably won't go to jail for pedophilia, though, because there was some financial stuff between him and Epstein. But anyway, it's ironic that the timing with Mandelson under a lot of heat right now, a long time pedophile, and then the victim re-victimized in jail for the last 8 years or whatever, 7 8 years, out of an 18-year sentence he was on, and all of a sudden they release him. They don't give any reason why he gets this early exit. He's only done about a third of the time that he was sentenced. But anyway, it's all very strange. So I put these two things together between Cliff Richard, Mandelson, the pedophile, famous, powerful, protected, and Carl Beech, the victim that was re-victimized, to make sure that no more victims come forth. And that's what these police operations all are about. Oh, they placate the pressure by the public because they want justice, and then they don't arrest any well-known or powerful person that's a pedophile. That's the history over and over again.
We could talk a long time on this. I mean, I mentioned my dad took 40 years for some sort of justice. Anyway, if somebody wants to get hold of your books, and I suggest they do, because they are very factual and written very well, and there's plenty of it there, how do they do that?
Well, because this is such an important topic that everybody needs to know about for the protection of your own children, if nothing else, I made sure that it's available online for free. It's on Amazon as well, but at pedoempire.org, that's where you can find every single chapter of all 5 books. You can also find all my articles at thegovernmentrag.com.
Fascinating, but terrifying at the same time, and very disturbing. Joachim Hagopian, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your day in downtown Bali. There's no such thing as downtown Bali, but anyway, it sounds good. Thank you very much for your time. This is The World Today.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
And welcome back. We're going to talk, it's death and destruction today, but we need to talk about it. And that was a very disturbing conversation. I mean, Joachim's superb, but when it gets down to the pedophilia that's running rife throughout the elite in the UK and the US, it's very scary. And then the way they bury it, and I can tell you they do bury it from personal experience. My dad, when he prosecuted the Catholic Church, Victorian government and the Victorian police force all in one go. Why do it by halves? Alexei Navalny was a Russian opposition leader. He died in February 2024 in an Arctic prison, a month before President Putin was re-elected in a landslide vote. On the 27th of April 2024, the Wall Street Journal wrote that the CIA, the Director of National Intelligence, and the US Department's Intelligence Unit determined that Russian authorities were not involved in the death of Navalny whilst he was imprisoned. Now, last week, Europe accused Russia, because they had a gold tooth maybe, of murdering Navalny, supported by such great countries, UK, France, Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands. He did it. He did it. Russia has hit back at these allegations, calling the accusations, and they are, in my opinion, we'll find out more what Eric thinks, they call this Western propaganda and a Western propaganda hoax. Eric Kraus is a Russia expert and a French national who has spent his entire career in finance in Moscow beginning in 1997 as head of fixed income for Dresdner Bank, and following the 1998 crisis as managing director of Uralsib Bank, and then Sovlink Bank, where he authored the best-known Russian strategy publication, Truth and Beauty and Russian Finance. We're going to talk to Eric about Navalny, who he met once before. Eric, thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
Tell me, what was Navalny like, Alexei Navalny like?
I met him very briefly on two occasions in public places. I knew some of his people very well. Vladimir Arshikov, several of his collaborators. And she, and in fact, Masha Gaidara at one time had attempted to recruit me to participate early on in his political career. And I said, you probably haven't read my papers. You don't really understand which side I'm on here. So thank you very much, but I will abstain. That said, I took the opportunity to meet with him a couple of times, and then I heard him speak first in Moscow, then out in the huskings in Siberia. And it was two different men. Moscow, Navalny was pro-Western, pro-liberal. He was squeaky clean, shiny, believed that Russia should embrace American values. When you heard him out in Siberia, it was Russia de Russian, Russia for the ethnic Russians. And you can send all those brown people back home. Now, Russia is a multi-ethnic state. Russia is made up of about 150 ethnicities. And the one way for the great neocon dream to come true, for Russia to blow apart, would be to foment ethnic hatred, ethnic tension in Russia. This would be a disaster, which is why Mr. Putin goes so far out of his way to, he prays at the Orthodox Church, but then he goes and today is going to be joining the Muslims for their ceremonies and the Buddhists, and he is very careful to be sure that all Russians know that they can find themselves in their government. And so for this reason, Navalny, who I have publicly characterized as a Russian Mussolini, because Mr. Navalny, in my opinion, had one great desire, one great principle in life, and that was Navalny himself. He could be a socialist, he could be a communist, he could be a right-winger, he could be a liberal. Whatever his audience wanted, that's what he was. And he came to a sticky end. There's certainly no evidence to suggest that the Russian government had anything to do with this.
Why would we know that they don't like Putin or Russia at all, because they're guilty of every crime in the world. But however, why would these countries, including the UK, why would they come out with this garbage? I mean, even without a body.
Well, 2 years after the fact, my background is in pharmacology and toxicology. I know a little bit about it. You don't take 2 years to run a tox analysis. One would assume that if they're claiming to have data, then they had to run something on body fluids or tissues. You cannot do it at 6,000 kilometers distance. Now, did they dig up the body? They haven't told us. If they had samples, then why did it take them 2 years to come up with this new and unknown a previously unknown toxin, except among the frogs. Perhaps it came from France. But why did it take them so long? And why now, just in the middle of a major PR campaign against Russia? They need something new every day to keep the presses rolling. What is fabulous is that no one asks the obvious question, cui bono? Who benefited? As we all know, and you can find this on ChatGPT,
We have lost Eric for one moment. He's back again. Eric, you dropped out.
sorry,
No, continue on.
Russian government was negotiating a prisoner swap to trade Navalny against some Russians held in German and American prisons. Now, alive, Mr. Navalny was a reasonably valuable card. Dead, he was useless. His popularity in Russia was running to about 5 or 6%. It had been much greater in Moscow and St. Petersburg before the war, before Ukraine. But obviously, the Ukraine war caused a major shift in the Russian public opinion, and the young generation, the Moscow, St. Petersburg, English-speaking generation, had shifted. They had finally understood that the West was not a friend to Russia. And Navalny represented that Western, the Facebook generation, I used to call it. So he was no threat. He was in prison. He could have been held incommunicado if they wanted to. Why should they bother to kill him? And why then? And why has it taken 2 years for us to hear that, oh, after all, they did it, although the CIA said otherwise?
The UK media, which has lost all credibility, in my opinion, years ago, but they're still at it. First of all, with Epstein, the Russians did it. The only thing the Russians did was that Bill Gates contracted a disease from a Russian lady of the night. So yeah, possibly they did that, but who can tell with Bill Gates? But having said that, the Russians are guilty of just about everything. Why? Surely the UK media, they actually know the truth. Why are they this voice for the government or for the anti-Russia, the anti-peace talks between Russia and Ukraine? Why are they doing that? Is this just a directive from the government?
Mike, if I am old enough to remember the days when The Economist, the Financial Times, actually attempted to put some diversity of opinion. The Economist set up straw men to knock them down, but at least they set up the straw men. Now, this would be considered treasonous to give any attention to the alternative view. It has become, frankly, Orwellian. There is a very, very long tradition of hatred against Russia in the UK. It goes back to the 19th century. This dark Eastern menace, which was going to sweep over Europe, ergo the Crimean War. Then they were our friends when it was convenient. And then once again, there's this demonization. And this is tragic because of the missed opportunity. In 1991, there was a possibility of long-term peace, the end of the Cold War. Russia and the West were going to become friends. We could stop wasting so much money on the military. There would be no threat of nuclear annihilation. And for 10 years or so, it was delightful until the Americans and their British lapdogs decided that this wasn't good enough, that quote, we had won the Cold War, and therefore Russia had to be pushed back into a corner. Russia did not consider that it had lost the Cold War. It considered that the Soviet Union had voted itself out of existence and that Russia expected to be welcomed with open arms by the Western community as, as an equal. And these people don't have equals. They have adversaries or serfs. But the notion that the old Slavic menace could be an equal was just not acceptable to them.
Are you surprised, and I think you've come to realise or understand how deep it is, the censorship permeates from either large companies or from various countries. And the West seems to be, at this stage, seems to be leading the way. Are you surprised at because, I mean, for example, UK journalists have been investigated for suspected terrorism offences. Now, there are many organisations that are shadowy and heavily funded by foreign dark money, such as the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. Now, that was set up by Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff. Then we have, even on the socials, we have it's almost like if you don't fit in with the narrative or the script, you're going to be sidetracked very quickly. Like when we know we are. We can be absolutely. We might have, just say, for example, if we had, I'd say, 10,000 watching us, they would say that we have one, and they do that for a reason, because you think, oh, nobody's watching it. So the censorship that basically comes from government, or as I said, those large companies, but mainly government. How bad is this for the world to move forward?
Mike, we were talking about frog poison. So since we're on the subject of frogs, I would like to cite the boiling frog. What is happening now, the degree of censorship, the degree of throwing people in prison for unsanctioned media posts, for silencing any, if you read the FT or the Economist, there is not one paper now going in the opposite direction, going against the editorial line. There used to be. I used to get occasionally op-eds published in the FT when I was in Moscow, and it would be inconceivable now. So gradually, people have given up on their freedom. They have accepted a truly Orwellian picture, and this is very dangerous, because if people are sufficiently misinformed, then and their government, Karl Kraus, my great ancestor, said, "How do wars start? Wars start when journalists lie, when politicians lie to journalists, then they believe what they read in the press." So there's a feedback loop here, and they end up believing what they are told, and therefore you make really bad policy decisions. And I find it terrifying that we are moving towards a situation analogous to 1912, 1914, to the First World War, where the jingoism and the bellicose rhetoric, and we have to spend more money on weapons, and we have to fight this terrible threat from a country which, on the one hand, is described as a gas station with, out in the tundra, and the other hand, an existential threat to Europe, which is about to sweep across the European plain to the Channel. But nobody asks the obvious question: does this make any sense? Who does this serve? Whose interests, whose financial, whose economic interests are served by this? It's not you. It's not your children. It's not the next generation. It is a very small coterie of people who have some very, who benefit very nicely from this sort of tension.
To try and expose this, I mean, again, it's very hard, because the legacy media always follow a particular, as you know yourself, they follow a particular narrative. They do push government narrative, and they get paid for it. whether it's from a community service announcement or government announcement and so forth. So they can justify that part and don't bite the hand that feeds you. Having said that, we find also that independent media is also controlled by many of those that control legacy media, but they don't tell anybody. And so they get to the nudging bit to push you back to what the way the government is pushing their narrative or a particular brand or whatever. So it's almost like an information operation, but it's not. How dangerous, when you mentioned that wars have been started by politicians lying, it really hasn't changed a whole lot, has it? The messenger you can't trust. The person that has the message, the politician you can't trust. How would you nut your way through it to find what the real story is, or is that going to become almost impossible?
It's not impossible, it's difficult, but you can't be too lazy. When I arrived in Russia in '97, I met an older Russian woman on the plane, and she was full of interesting information and views on a country which was very new to me. And she said, Eric, the only difference between we Russians and you Westerners is we don't believe our own propaganda. You do. The Russians were fairly skeptical for the simple reason that they had been lied to in the Soviet Union, and the lie was acknowledged. It came out into the open. It became part of the official discourse. So yes, people became skeptical. In the West, the lies have never been acknowledged. Perhaps in the United States after Vietnam, but even then they found a way to put some lipstick on the pig. So I argue with Westerners who say, oh, well, we know all about Ukraine. I say, have you ever read an original source? Do you speak Russian or Ukrainian? Okay, this stuff is available in translation. There are alternative media. The alternative media, as you say very rightly, have their own agenda too. However, what you have to do is get the Western viewpoint, get the Russian viewpoint, perhaps the Chinese viewpoint, and then triangulate and try to figure out for yourself what makes sense. What is an obvious story you are being sold? Whose interests are being served, and is what they're telling you make any sense? Did it make sense for Mr. Putin to kill Navalny when he was going to swap him? Was there any reason to get the massive bad PR when he was politically a spent force? Why did Russia invade Ukraine? Did Putin wake up one morning and say, oh, I feel evil today, I'm looking for someone to... No, there is an 8-10 year history of NATO expansion, but this has been washed out. This has been Typexed out, if anyone remembers Typex. And this is very dangerous.
It is dangerous, isn't it? Just from your observations, do you think it's getting worse?
Yes. And this is going to go against the editorial line here, but I am, as I said, my background is in medicine and I'm fully vaccinated. I believe that climate change is a very real threat. And to me, the Epstein files are a red herring. And I'm probably going to get lynched for saying that. But okay, there's diversity of opinion. What I find disturbing is that if you tell me what someone thinks of Bitcoin, I'll tell you what they think of vaccines and climate change. Now these are entirely different questions, and there is no correlation really between them unless you're very paranoid. But there has been a segregation of opinion into two camps, and you have to belong to one camp. I catch hell from both camps because I have my own views and I express them. I may be wrong a lot of the time, but I don't, I try to seek what my version of truth. And this does not seem to be a very popular stance these days.
No, I think as the world moves on, I think we've become, you're right, separate camps. I think we've become very intolerant to other ideas. I was always taught that you tell it as it is. and that's it. I mean, it's there is the fact and the truth, and it's not, I haven't got my own truth, and you haven't got your own truth. It's the fact. The fact is, those numbers say that give that particular answer. So I think we have I think the world needs to be able to sit down and to talk. Whether we're able to do that, though, because of the inherent bias that everybody has, and we're all looking for that person.
The economic interests.
Yep.
I mean, the Financial Times is owned by Nikkei. You notice that as relations between Russia and between China and Japan deteriorate, Japan becomes reflexively more anti-Russian. The FT does not miss a beat. Every single day now, there's another horror story about Russia. I think they have files, and each day because people get bored of the old one, they come up with a new one. They have to keep the audience focused, and there are economic and political interests which are driving this, and they're driving us towards a cliff edge. And I really don't know how to change it. I speak in the media when I get the chance. And I hope people are skeptical enough, because, if I listen to RT, I'm also pretty skeptical. I mean, some of their stories don't really work. But okay, they at least they're honest about who they are speaking for. They are Kremlin-controlled, Kremlin-owned, and they don't make any secret of it. So you listen to them, and then you sort of sort through what is credible and what isn't. The Western media claim to be fair and free and independent. And please.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have run out of time, but invitation is there whenever you fill up for a bit of a chat on the air.
I'm always happy.
I think you're very illuminating, and I enjoy it. Very, very concise at the same time. Eric, if somebody wants to find out more about you, besides all those Marvel,
my FBI file.
Good on you. But are you on socials at all?
I'm occasionally on Facebook. I'm pulled away from the social media because I waste too much time. It's like chewing gum for the mind. And I'm no longer issuing my strategy notes, though perhaps if somebody might tempt me into doing so. But you'd probably find me on Facebook and, on the internet like everybody else.
Fantastic. Eric Kraus, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. This is the World Today. Coming up next, we'll have the protagonists and still talking about the subject we're talking about now.
With the latest information and analysis of major events from around the world, this is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. Nice to have your company. It's a 8:15 in the UK, 6:15 in Queensland, 100 years behind. No, just joking. New South Wales and Victoria, it's 7:15, and they're home right now, probably having a shardy or something like that. And far too early in the UK, although looking at my chat, I'm sure they would push one back if they could. Now, we're talking today about the ascendency of technocracy, and if we should rightfully be concerned about decisions being made for us by our tech oligarchs. Think about it. They do control our lives. Dr. Shane Fudge I presume he enjoyed a 20-year career in academia in a variety of teaching, research and educational roles. Shane completed a PhD in social policy in 2006, then undertook a 6-year postdoctoral research post at the University of Surrey, specialising in the governance and policy of low carbon transition. He then took up a 5-year teaching post at the University of Exeter, teaching energy policy, environmental politics, and research methods in environment and sustainability. He left academia in 2017 and now writes for the alternative media in the UK. He is published in the Light Truth newspaper, which is a great newspaper, The Conservative Woman, and The White Rose. First of all, thanks to Shane for joining us. Shane, thank you very much.
Morning.
Do we have to worry about what is happening to us in the very near future?
Yeah, we do. I think the pervasiveness of technology in our society has been an accident waiting to happen, really. We are so enmeshed in technology now, and it's going to be the major control mechanism for these so-called oligarchs into the future. And we're already a lot of the way there. I think what happened in 2020 was a black swan event in many ways, but what it did, it uncovered a lot of the ways in which we are totally hooked into technology. And, social media platforms exploit the brain's reward systems in much the same ways as any other kind of addiction and drug. So it's a very difficult one. What it means is that we've got a population that is really kind of already enmeshed in these kind of systems of control, and it's kind of fed on top of a lot of other kind of things, such as lifestyles, and it also feeds into kind of the lower kind of emotions as well. So it lights up particular areas of the brain which make us a lot easier to control. So it's quite a concern, really. And the fact that this kind of revolution's being led by the Silicon Valley kind of tech oligarchs is pretty worrying, I think, for us all.
It is, isn't it? I just reading a whole bunch of notes here. We know who the elites are. Then there are levels below these people, who are the gatekeepers, where our governments are situated. And they have less power than the elites. Do they have enough power to change the direction that the elites set out for us?
I think, from my kind of research, I think this is a window of opportunity to kind of to move in. I think this is, the Great Reset, Fourth Industrial Revolution, whatever you're going to call it, has been in the planning for decades. And I think the difference is now that everything is in place for this to actually happen. So I think this is why they made their move in 2020. And also, for my own research, the Trump administration, I think it's kind of Silicon Valley and the tech oligarchs, the technocracy, that kind of ideology, which has been around since the 1930s, has now found its kind of way, found its kind of platform. Unelected and officials, and that's the way they want it. No politics in this. The plan is to kind of do away with national governments and to kind of run society on a resource base rather than a market based kind of mechanism. And so this is going to be run by experts rather than politicians. You can take your choice as to which is the lesser of the two evils, but this is going to be a system that's not going to be, it's in no way going to be related to democratic systems of voting. The issues that they're going to deal with have already been decided: the climate crisis, resource dependency, the possibility we're going to run out of resources. And it's all going to be based around that rather than price mechanisms. They've already ring-fenced the issues that they're going to be dealing with. And of course, things like climate change, there's lots of challenges around that, whether it's actually taking place or not, as a lot of the other issues. Whether we're going to run out of resources, well, that's a moot point. Do we really know how much oil reserves we've got? So all these issues are kind of already ring-fenced for us, and they already decide. These are already the decisions these people are going to make. So there's no challenge. It's almost like climate change. If you question that, if you question the science, it's a moral, virtuous issue rather than a scientific issue. So these are all concerning. These issues have already been ring-fenced the way we're going to be living our lives.
Interesting, isn't it? I mean, the people who you think would be a little more intelligent, say, for example, climate change. We know it's a scam, but regardless, it just moves on and on and on and on and just rolls over those with a another opinion because the lie is bigger than the truth. I went to Hawaii a couple of years ago, a year ago, and I was waiting to get into the room, and a newspaper in Melbourne called me, and they, first of all said, "Oh, are you the conduit between Russians and Donald Trump?" And I thought that was ridiculous. And anyway, he said, and I started to laugh. He said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Well, that's just crazy. Next year we were saying that climate change is real." Well, I mean, forget the Russia thing. Even they could have blown up the world because I said, I started to question climate change. This guy who called me from Australia, outside of on my mobile phone, cell phone, but he called me and he was so upset he hung up in my ear.
Wow.
And it's really interesting though, the climate change thing. Hey, can you tell me which countries are at the forefront of this, I suppose, technocratic revolution and another word probably digital gulags? And I believe there's Israel, Ukraine, and India, of all places.
Wow. I mean, from my research, mostly the kind of the tech oligarchs in the Silicon Valley, but a global governance is obviously a world without borders. So these tech elites operate according to their own little network, which is global and it's borderless. So, part of the architecture that they're building is going to be a global gulag, if you like. So, and these people are going to be unaccountable. So experts making decisions. And the thing with technocracy is a history of technocracy that goes back to, as I said, to the 1930s. This was an idea that experts could run the world without the interference from politicians. So politicians are just a nuisance, really, and the real experts have to make these decisions. So technocracy is something that's been around for a long time, and it's a little bit like all the other ideologies that structure governments like monetarism and Keynesianism. It's found its way now, it's found its idea, and it's also found a climate because there's a guy called Matthias Desmet who wrote a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, and he's kind of drawing on the traditions of people like Hannah Arendt and people like that that were looking at the kind of how the Nazis were able to influence so much over their population, how they were able to get so much buy-in from their populations. And the thing with technocracy is that it has a few major ideas now that have been taking place and have been being embedded over the last few years. And one of the issues that Matthias Desmet makes is that totalitarian comes from the population. So what you've had over the last kind of 30 years or so, I guess, is a growing kind of people want action taken over climate change. So they're calling for action from governments to kind of oversee this. So you can see this is kind of taking place over a long period of time. People, and the same with COVID. So you have to have some kind of buy-in from populations to actually make these kind of transitions. So the way they've done this is to feed in these kind of fear-based kind of issues over the last few years. So global boiling and, adverse weather events, which we're seeing, which may or may not be attributed to climate change. I think they're probably not. But you've had all these different events so people are actually calling for people to make decisions for them. So that's how they've been able to get a lot of buy-in over this over the last few years. And then you can kind of, as you were saying, that discussion, if you say anything against the science on any of these things, you're a denier or you're a conspiracy theorist, all these different convenient labels to kind of discredit anyone that questions the science. And so, I mean, we've moved on from science now as being something that people negotiate and discuss to something that's actually a fait accompli. It's actually, there's no room for discussion. These are things that are actually in place and you don't question them or challenge them. Otherwise, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, there's many of those that control the world, almost like the evil one. They seem to be quite mad. I mean, they are quite mad. But who's going to rein them in? Because if you look at governments, they seem to be quite mad too. I saw some hope with one of the news items that at 10 Downing Street, there's a cat there. So maybe there is hope for the UK after all, that the cat will start making decisions much better than what the Prime Minister's making. But who's going to rein these evil people in? Because the governments, they're in bed with them and they're just as mad.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different. This is a collusion between the tech elite and the governments, but also the kind of real puppet masters behind this, which I call the 13 bloodline families, from my research, I think actually pull the strings. And all these people really are as the shop window. So people like Bill Gates are the kind of shop window for all this. And the tech elites are the ones that are able to put these things into operation because they have the technology. Whether they're mad or not, I don't know, probably, but they're very rational. They're very kind of left brain. They're very kind of neutral. That there's no kind of feeling. It's like this is the way forward, and this is the rational way forward. So if this is the way we have to move forward, so depopulation and all the other kind of agendas on, then this is the way we have to go. That's why they don't really believe in politics, because they feel it gets in the way of rational decision making. I mean, this is kind of almost like the culmination of years of kind of left brain education, indoctrination into our educational systems, our universities and schools, where there's no room for kind of emotional or kind of empathy or anything like that. It's kind of rational decision making. This is the way we do this, and this is the way forward. I mean, I think the Trump government is a kind of the MAGA thing. I don't know if you remember the inauguration of the Trump presidency. Elon Musk came and he said, "We're the dark MAGAs. We're the dark enlightenment." The dark enlightenment for me is a kind of almost a kind of a nod and a wink to the people that know what's really going on. Because I believe all governments are kind of controlled by corporations and people behind the scenes and that. So these are almost like things like MAGA are almost kind of like a veneer. Let's make America great again. But underneath it, there's a Silicon Valley kind of group that are the ones making the real decisions. I mean, they already did when they came in. Doge was about obtaining mass amounts of data from all sectors of society, which is going to be kind of used in this electronic infrastructure that they're building. And nobody hears about that. All you hear is about Let's America Great Again. There's a couple of things that are done here and there that, but underneath it all, there's a kind of this architecture being built by the real kind of power behind what's happening in the Great Reset.
It is actually very scary if you look at these data centres that have been built around the world. Australia's got a bit of a problem. We're going to build all these big data centres, but we haven't got enough water for them.
Yeah.
And we haven't got enough electricity for them. Reliable electricity. And we can't build small nuclear power stations to power them up because we'll sell our uranium to the rest of the world, but we can't build anything here because we might damage the world. So we'll let you and the others damage the world. Bugger. So, but they're moving ahead, and these data centers, in my mind, are very scary because knowledge is king, and
it's the currency. Yeah,
it is. Do you think, just as we wrap this up, do you think we're going backwards when it comes to human rights, liberties, creative input, individual decision making? I'm going to tell you what. I mean, every morning I wake up. I do wake up. It's always nice to, and you will attest to that. and I'll ask Alexa, what's the what the forecast is, and it would tell me, and then I'll go into the living room because I like to make sure that it's right. I'll ask Google, and it tells me a bit of a different forecast, different temperatures and stuff. So, what we're doing is we're being led by, if I say it's going to rain, or Alexa says it's going to rain, so I dress up because it's going to rain, and then Google says no, it's not. It's going to be a very warm day without any rain. Then what I've done is I made a decision based on misinformation. Can you see that happening? Forget there was just using that as an example, but we rely so much on computers. Even with the AI systems such as Grok and those, and we're starting to rely on these more and more. The information they give us may not necessarily be right, but it's what the people running these devices, that's what they want you to know, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a couple of things to that. We have, from my own research, we have nearly 500 data centers in the UK now. And they're going to be building 100, I believe, in the next year or so. And they need this to run their system. And as you say, it's very energy intensive and very water intensive. And the interesting thing for me, I'm not sure if you're aware, Tony Blair came in yesterday and said that he doesn't agree with net zero, which is a really interesting. I don't like Tony Blair. I don't like David Miliband either, actually.
But he did believe it until he bought into a data center.
But I'm wondering whether Blair realises that net zero, which is going to reduce our energy production and consumption by a huge amount, and probably 50%, I would imagine, to we're moving away from conventional energy systems. Maybe he realises they're not going to be able to run their data centres.
No, I think you're right.
It occurred to me,
Yeah, they got bikes. They're all sitting, pedaling away, quick. But it's a worry, isn't it? Because we do have to finish up here, so which is a pity. But it's the way the world is going is. We had a friend from UAE stay with us one day, and he said the West is upside down, and that's what it is at the moment, isn't it?
By design.
Yep, and it is by design.
Yeah.
How can we stop it? Just a very quick answer here. How do we stop it? I don't think it's possible.
That's a big question. Yeah, it's difficult because people are so enmeshed. People are waking up. Things like, that Blair calling that out, and they're starting to expose their own hypocrisies. There is some, I know a lot of this is theatre you see on the media and in politics, but they are starting to expose their own contradictions and their own hypocrisies. And the more they do that, the more people wake up. You have this big argument over net zero and that. You have different political parties springing up in the UK, and all the time the veneer is being exposed more and more. That's the only kind of, we're bigger numbers than they are. That's more and more people are waking up all the time. I see it all the time. People are starting to understand and see through the massive inconsistencies in these arguments. And they're also going to see how much it's going to impact them, because for a lot of people, they're only going to wake up when they can't eat or when they can't move to their local neighbourhood and things like that. That will wake a lot more people up as well. I see hope in that, but I'm hoping it's not going to get too far before that happens, and that we can wake up a bit sooner to what's actually going on.
I had a thought, but my parents, who are both gone now, they would have wished for the days that a tablet was something you put in your mouth. Something that controls your life.
Yeah.
Shane, it's a pleasure, and if you're up to it, we can do this again next week, because I enjoyed.
Lovely, yeah, I look forward to it.
Absolutely fantastic. If somebody wants to find out more about what you do, how do they, or read your articles, how do they do that?
You contact the editor at Conservative Woman and the Light paper. They will pass my details on.
They're very good, the light. Absolutely love them.
Yeah, great. Yeah, brilliant.
Fantastic. Very illuminating too, and a great conversation. Dr. Shane Fudge here on The World Today.
Biodiversity is life. Our forests, grasslands, deserts, waterways, estuaries, coastlines, coral reefs, and oceans are all living ecosystems, our planetary life support systems. These living ecosystems are ancient synergistic tapestries woven over billions of years, long before the advent of agriculture, housing, mining, energy systems, and infrastructure. Now, the remnants of these ancient ecosystems stand under relentless siege from large-scale renewable energy infrastructure and critical minerals mining. The scale of this is so vast that it will sweep across our beautiful country and will leave a lasting legacy of sterile wastelands and add to the climate catastrophe. So, dear humanity, this is our plea. Let the guardianship of wild places rise above the false messaging of lobby groups that campaign for mining and industrialization of wild places as sustainable and green on behalf of profit-driven renewable energy corporations and investors. Destroying the remnant functioning biosphere, the ecosystems and habitats, is no climate solution. These are habitats that are home to the tremendous diversity of birds, mammals, reptiles, insects, fungi and plants that we call biodiversity, and these are natural climate regulators. Once they're gone forever. The clock is ticking, and it's only seconds before midnight. But it's still not too late to stop this onslaught destroying Australia's remaining unique wild places and biodiversity that we cherish and love for now and for future generations.
And welcome back to the water. I pushed the wrong button. Sorry, Robin. I didn't want to surprise you like that. Interesting that message, by the way. We just played that small commercial or public service announcement. If you haven't been to Australia, and you would have read about it. All these beautiful mountains and up Queensland, the Great Dividing Range. Well, they're going to bulldoze the top off. They're going to put in these windmills. I think 3,500 of them, plus many tens of thousands of other windmills right around Australia. And in doing so, they're going to destroy the natural habitat. Koalas can't live there, and if there's bushfires, you can't put it out, which we have lots of fires. None of that sort of stuff. And yet you have, it's called the NEPA, N-E-P-A, the National Environment Protection Authority, or association, whatever they call, and it's got to look after Australia's, all of Australia's bushland and environment. Not one thing. It's a guy called Chris Bowen is our environment minister, and he's pushing ahead to have NEPA activated at the same time, pushing ahead to make sure that we put in tens of thousands of windmills and destroy our natural terrain. Pretty much a sign of madness, isn't it? One hand saying this, the other hand destroying it. And of course, the legacy media in Australia has not picked that up. And the people were just going, oh, that sounds good. Oh, yes, that sounds really good. Very much like this. Why is Keir Starmer's government so hell-bent on rejoining the EU? Maybe he has a thing for von der Leyen. Who knows? Despite this being overwhelmingly rejected by the UK citizens, and they did, Are there any benefits for the UK? Because it seems the UK will pay a pretty penny to again surrender its independence. Robin Tilbrook is the leader and chairman of the English Democrats and chairman of the Workers of England Union. Robin, thank you for joining us, and now you can come in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Can you just, I just want to read you this from Starmer, if you don't mind. And I'd like to get your, and by the way, don't go towards your muskets. Just sit there and enjoy this, what I'm going to read you from Starmer. It's a statement from Keir Starmer. We are not the Britain of Brexit years anymore, says Starmer in Germany. Great place, by the way. We must look outwards and work with our European neighbours to keep our country safe. There is no British security without Europe. And Ursula, I put that part in myself, and no European security without Britain and Ursula. It's a pretty, I mean, the Ursula bit I put in myself because I'm being frivolous, but what's wrong with this statement? I mean, I could tell you now what's wrong with it. Does he ever wonder why he's on the nose with the UK? Because surely most people in the UK would have to be going, nah, this guy has lost the plot. He's doing what he wants.
I think he's probably got to the point where most people in the UK don't actually listen very much to what he has to say.
That's a problem, though, because he's still going to bring in things that, if they don't listen to what he says, how will they know what he's going to bring in?
Well, it's just a fact that quite a lot of people do not follow politics, are not interested in politics, and something very sort of abstract, like what you're talking about there, although very important, a lot of people simply don't follow it. And I think it's, in just in terms of recent history, it is worth just bearing in mind that although Labour, notionally at any rate, has got a great majority in the House of Commons and is in the process of creating a majority in the House of Lords, and therefore would have full control over the central constitutional legislative structures, nevertheless, it actually got the votes of only about 20% of the electorate. So we have an electoral system which rewards the fact that quite a lot of people simply don't take any part in elections and have no interest in politics. And when you're talking about something as serious as they just don't follow it. So that's why he's able to, partly why he's able to get away with saying and doing things that most people simply don't support.
Because it's the same thing in Australia. It's people say, "Oh, how did that happen?" It's been going on for like 2 years. Well, it happened because you didn't take any notice of it. But Starmer doesn't have a mandate to do what he would like to do. And that's probably just to bugger up the UK. But he's doing it. How can he get away with it?
Well, like I say, the fact is he hasn't got a mandate, you might say, from a sort of popular democratic point of view, rather than the liberal democracy where you have systems in place that prevent the majority from actually getting what they want. But from a popular democratic point of view, where you're looking at what the majority want, then he hasn't got a mandate at all anyway. Quite a lot of what he's been doing since he became prime minister has been actually directly contrary to what they said they were going to do in the election. They've got a majority in the House of Commons. They're getting a majority in the House of Lords. They feel that they can do what they want. That they are most of the leadership of the Labour Party are Fabians. Their logo originally for Fabians was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Mm-hmm. They came in as a sheep, and we're now seeing the wolf.
Who are the people behind this push?
Well, I think it's the whole EU project has always been anti-nation state. The idea of the EU, or before that the European Common Market, it's never been about reinforcing nation state. It's never really been about democracy. It's been a project to internationalize Europe, and that is part of a general project to try and create a world government, I think.
I think you're about right. Can you see any real benefits for the EU integration?
There's no benefits to a British nation state or England in integration within the EU. In fact, on the contrary, it's a threat, and it's a threat to not only to our national interests but also to our democracy and our individual rights.
Yeah, the UK growth has increased tremendously since leaving. Media and government doesn't promote that. Let me read these things. 14% increase in GDP since the UK finally left the EU on 31st December 2020. And since Brexit, UK business investment in real terms has grown by nearly 20%. This would most likely undo all that good.
Yes, it almost certainly would, Mike, but there is an additional factor here, and that is that much of what Labour's been up to since it got into power has been undermining growth, and in that sense they're rather carrying on what some of the Conservative people were doing beforehand. So we're now at a point where we've got taxes at a level that's higher than any time since we were involved in the Second World War. And we've got all sorts of regulations coming in and already been imposed, which undermine business.
It's pretty scary, isn't it? Because if he wants to go down this path, can you just let me know? Such as defence, climate, all things EU. It's going to cost a fortune. You haven't got any money.
That's absolutely right, Mike. The state, the British state, is fairly close to being bankrupt, but I think they haven't played all their last cards yet, which would leave all the rest of us bankrupt as well. So they are feeling that they're in power. They can decide what's going to happen. They can make the rules, and at the moment, we are still a country where people generally obey whatever they're told to do. If you take our tax system is based upon people giving their information to the state and then working out how much they ought to pay. This is what all businesses and self-employed people have to do. Having worked out how much they've got to pay, then they pay it. Now, most countries in the world, that simply wouldn't work. People wouldn't pay. They wouldn't declare what they'd earned, and they wouldn't pay whatever the state said. We've worked. Our system has worked on compliance from the population for a long while, and I suppose a real danger to the state is actually that people stop complying.
It's I'm just thinking your independence, because that's going to go. You become less independent. The legal and human rights agenda, that'll change. What do you think? I can't get my head around why he would do this, because he's going to create all these sorts of headaches. What does Nigel Farage do if he gets into power? He can't do much, can he? Because if it's already done, for him to undo it, it's going to cost a fortune.
Yes, I think you're right. might know. And certainly one of the things that the Labour leadership have been talking about is trying to reform-proof the system. So in other words, they make it impossible for a subsequent government to change things. That would only work if the government coming in hadn't really worked out exactly what they were going to do to reverse things. It would be possible, though difficult, and there's a fairly narrow window of opportunity at the beginning of the new period of government to make major changes. You mentioned about human rights, just changing the subject very slightly. You mentioned about human rights. It is worth bearing in mind that when we're talking about human rights, certainly in the context of what's happened here in Britain, is that the Blair government comes in and it then talks up the idea of human rights. We have the Human Rights Act. But these are human rights that are the opposite of the traditional English common law rights. Traditional English common law rights are our rights as individuals. The human rights that they're talking about and that are centred around the European Convention on Human Rights, those rights are the rights of the state to tell us what we can and cannot do, and to give us limited freedoms which can be taken away in all sorts of circumstances. So it sounds grand, human rights, but actually the agenda is very often against individual liberty.
Nigel Farage has said that when he gets in 3.5 years' time or thereabouts, that he will exit 600,000 illegal immigrants. Donald Trump has said the same thing by using ICE, which has made a few headlines here and there. In the US, they have around about 40 million illegal immigrants, and so far they've exited 200,000 of those. So they still have just about the entire amount there, because 40 million's a lot. If Nigel Farage wants to do the same thing in the UK and get rid of 600,000, that's 3 times more than what Donald Trump has done, and he has a bigger task force to do that. He's just about given up because it's just too hard. Do you think Nigel is sort of he needs a reality tablet quickly to say, look, you're not going to get rid of 600,000. Can you imagine 600,000 that need to be exited, and they may very well need to be exited, but all the protests you'll have, the chaos in the streets. Do you think Nigel should probably revisit that decision and say, well, there's not much we can do about it, or we will destroy the rest of the country trying to do something about it?
Nigel Farage has made various contradictory remarks about this. Sometimes, to some audiences, he does talk up a game of definitely doing something about illegal immigrants. But in other audiences, he's much more equivocal about it and much less concerned about getting rid of illegal immigrants. I don't know how serious he would be if he actually got into office. We don't know whether he's going to achieve that. I mean, at the moment, what's happening here is we're getting further sort of disintegration, really, rather than integration on the right of politics. And we've just had the launch of a new party, Restore Britain, under Rupert Lowe, and there's all sorts of excitement about that. But whether that's going to impact on reform's chances, we don't know, and we won't be able to say, I don't think, until much closer to whenever the general election will be. And I think it's worth saying the general election at the moment, the rule is that general elections have to be every 5 years. But bear in mind the control that Starmer and his people have got over the constitutional legislative arrangements, that there's nothing that could legally stop them from reverting to the 7-year rule, which we used to have a couple of hundred years ago. So they might well not have the general election in 2029. We will have to wait and see. They have, however, just suffered quite a serious setback to their anti-democratic agenda. They've been cancelling local elections.
I saw that. They've done an about turn.
Well, they've done an about turn because they were about to lose a case in the High Court, and they didn't think they'd got any chance of succeeding in that case. And quite honestly, I don't think they did have any chance. With my legal hat on, as it were, I think they were going to lose. However, if they had fought it out and then appealed, they would have managed to block these elections because the time to do the elections would have gone. It's Hamlet in Shakespeare talks about the law's delay. The law does work to delay things, and they could have delayed a final legal decision until after it was too late to have the elections, at which point they would have achieved what Starmer was trying to achieve, which was to avoid allowing reform to build momentum, and also to keep a lid on the voters' rebellion against Labour.
So if everything goes, not swimmingly well, because if it was, he'd be drowning. But if it sort of goes his way and you become much closer to the EU, just say, for example, Nigel gets in. And by the way, Alan Cook was saying that he gave me the 600,000 figure. So obviously Nigel's messaging needs to be tightened up a fair bit. But regardless of that, Nigel's in power. He's the new Prime Minister. What do you think the European Court will do on their desire to deport asylum seekers? Probably just stop it.
Well, you're right. The European there's two European courts, confusingly, but there's a European court that deals with EU matters, which currently we're not subject to for almost anything. But there are a few items still under the current arrangements where that could kick in. But the European court that we're normally talking about here is the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and that is a court where it doesn't actually have real powers. It's again a compliance thing where various states are told that they're what they're doing is not in compliance with the convention. And they then decide to do what they're told by the European Convention judges, and that's the essence of what's been going on with the European Court of Human Rights. That the states have decided to comply. If a state decided not to comply, there would probably be a publicity row about it, but there wouldn't actually be anything very much that people could do about it. So it isn't a situation where the Labour and the Conservative actually had to do what they were told. It was that they, in effect, decided that that's what they were going to do. And there are also ways in which you can limit the effect of the European Convention of Human Rights. They're called derogations. If a state decides to derogate from particular parts of the convention, then it can ignore that bit.
Who would want to be a politician? Actually, and I see your country, it's in a. I mean, if Starmer does stay there till for another 3.5 years, I think whoever gets in after that has got a massive headache. If somebody wants to
be worse than that, Mike, because Starmer's almost certainly going to be out.
I'm being polite. But you have your muskets and probably a good whiskey hidden, so you'll be fine. Maybe not. You might be. Join the army. You got weapons. Something like that. Robin, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Yes, I'm on Twitter at Robin Tilbrook. I'm also the English Democrats is englishdemocrats.party, and the Workers of England Union is workersofengland.co.uk.
Robin Tilbrook, always a pleasure. I was very polite about your muskets this time. Normally I'd have a little more of a dig, only because I'm jealous. So I'm not all that well today, so I'm behaving myself. But next time, let the games begin. Robin Tilbrook, thank you so much. This is The World Today. We'll catch you again tomorrow with the World Today and the protagonists. Have a great one. By the way, it's almost 3 after 9 in the UK, 3 after 7 in Queensland, and 3 after 8 in New South Wales and Victoria. Thank you so much for your time.